Good morning, my fellow treasure hunters, friends, and associates. Today I want to continue my discussion of the mysteries in the Grand Canyon. And today I want to talk about the cultural evidences of the vast civilizations that existed there. Archaeological surveys and other explorations into the Grand Canyon have shown that literally every piece of livable real estate within the canyon and up along the canyon rims were at one time inhabited by different civilizations of people. Probably the most well known, and those that still exist to this day, are the Paiute, the Havasupai, the Wallapai, the Navajo Indians, the Hopi Indians, which both have emergent stories that coincide with areas within the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon runs right through the northern part of the Navajo Nation. As you know, the Grand Canyon runs from the state of Colorado all the way through Utah, Arizona, and through Nevada, and down into California. So it covers a vast historical region. And there are many cliff dwellings, granaries, petroglyph and pictograph panels of mysterious Native American art. We know that the Jesuits were here. Father Kino's mission, one of the oldest missions in the United States that the Spanish started, came up into the southern rim of the Grand Canyon. Father Kino's mission extended over into the northern area of the Grand Canyon, but not much is known about that, according to history. But that's one of my areas of special interest. That's the area that I live, the northern part of the Arizona Strip, right on the border of Utah, Arizona, not too far away from Nevada. And so I have a lot of information from the area history and from the pioneer records, some from my own family, that tell things about this area that not too many people know about. The Father Escalante expedition that came through this area in 1776 contains a lot of information about the area that, if studied, tells a lot of subtle information as well as some very valuable details that not too many people know about. The Father Escalante expedition talks about the native people that they encountered on their trip. It tells about the areas that they camped, the springs, the names of things, the things that they named. They tell about geological occurrences, areas where they see silver deposits, copper deposits, possible gold-bearing regions. They talk about the type of terrain that they had to go through and the eventual area that they were able to cross the Colorado at the crossing of the Fathers, which was an old Indian crossing, known to most of the native tribes in the area, as well as, I believe, the Aztec and any other groups that came this way. As we know, it ties closely in. It's not too far from the Kanab region, where we have a lot of, as you say, where there's smoke, there's also fire. A lot of evidence of the Aztec talked about. We have the Freddy Crystal story, which leaves us with an open mystery that we'll eventually talk about. We have the Three Lakes region that has also been talked about, that a lot of treasure hunters and explorers in this area know about. It was written about by several of the treasure writers, most of which are all passed on to the far shores, onto the happy hunting grounds now. My friend Steve Schaefer talked about these. My friend George Thompson, who wrote Lost Treasures on the Old Spanish Trail and many other books. We have the key glyphs, which come up from Mexico. They come up from Mexico and they end in this region right here where I live. They're in northern Arizona and southern Utah, and a trail all the way up from the outskirts of Mexico, and they are found nowhere else. And so keep your eyes open for these type of glyphs. If you find any of these type of glyphs, I would like to know about them and the location of them, because they are leading to something. And I believe they're leading to the Aztecs' locations where they left their records, their history, perhaps treasure to us, but to them it was more than that. I believe it was their genealogies. I believe that these glyphs lead to very important discoveries in the future of information that were left by these people. They brought them here to get them out of the hands of the Spanish conquistadors, who melted everything down of any value and shipped it back to Spain. These things would be priceless relics and information of the history of the Aztec and of other people perhaps in this region. We know most, if not all, of the groups from this region, the Four Corners region, the region up into northern Utah, stretching into Nevada, and in parts of Colorado and Arizona. The people speak to this day, the native speaking languages are Uto Aztecan languages. The basis of their language is Aztec. The people. Nahuatl. Some of the other evidences I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to mention them here, and then I'm going to show photographs and talk about it more in detail. The evidences of these civilizations on the Arizona Strip. We have the sacred location of the Hopi Indians, that call this location the Simpapu, the place of emergence. It's an actual location along the Little Colorado River where there is an unusual formation, an uplifted piece of land, uplifted rock formation or formation, that the Hopis say is the entrance to the underworld. Along the mesa ruins, we have evidences of many, along the tops of the mesas, we have evidences of many Native American sites or ruins. And many of these sites have no associated springs or water sources at this time. Where did these people get the critical water that they needed while they were living in this desert region? This goes back to what I was talking about in the previous video about how this entire region at one time was covered with water. The Western Interior Seaway, the unknown or unnamed, I shouldn't say it was unknown, but the unnamed huge lake that covered the Grand Staircase area. The huge ancient Lake Uinta. The well-known, more well-known and talked about, the Lake Bonneville, which covered the northwestern region of Utah, parts of Nevada and Idaho. We have into Nevada, we have the Lake Lahontan, which is talked about in the Washoe and the Paiute oral traditions as a huge inland lake that drained suddenly after a massive earthquake. Both of these tribes talk about how they used to paddle their boats back and forth to visit their brothers and friends in the Paiute, and the Paiutes used to paddle their boats to visit their friends in the Washoe tribe. And after this great earthquake, they had to walk on dry ground. One of the things it mentioned is after the great earthquake and the water suddenly rushed out, there were huge fish left laying all over the land. And near Pyramid Lake in northern Nevada, there are many petroglyphs, a huge petroglyph panel that seems to show, at least in my opinion, it shows volcanoes, it shows earthquakes, it shows massive destruction, and it shows dead fish laying on the ground. There are many of these petroglyphs they're open to interpretation, but if you look at them and you know the back history, you can see the evidences in the petroglyph panels. This petroglyph panel is considered by anthropologists to be the oldest known petroglyphs in North America. Now, I don't believe this is the case. I believe there are many that happened at the same time or that are just as old or older. There's really no way for anthropologists and archaeologists to date stone petroglyphs pecked in the stone. The only thing they take as their clues is from the existing organic matter that can be found left around these various regions in the different ruins. The overhanging ledges with the duff and the civilizations that are left there. They use dendrochronology, carbon dating methods, which I believe are highly suspect in many cases. And they use different things like the types of crops that are found, the different types of sandals and clothing. They date any hair samples or bone fragments that they find from the animals that were eaten by these people, or by their bones themselves of the dead, the buried, from the burials that they may come across and excavate. Now, as I mentioned, many of these mesa ruins have no historical water support to this day. I can take people to many areas that are on top of little mesas with the lower part down 100 feet or 50 feet or 150 feet, and there's no springs in the area at all. How did these people that lived in these areas survive? Well, I think they floated into these areas by boat. I think that these civilizations existed and were there as the water was draining. For hundreds of years, this area was covered with big lakes and an inland sea before that. And as the water came down and those mesas became exposed, the people came in by boat, lived on these mesas until the water lowered and disappeared, and then they moved on to other locations. You can see evidences of this in the southwestern petroglyphs and pictographs. There is an interesting article online that you can look up and research that's called Boats in the Desert. And the whole point of this article and this topic is to talk about petroglyph panels in the desert southwest that show Native American people in boats. And so I believe there's a lot more evidence of this out there than this article, Boats in the Desert. If any of you are hiking in the desert southwest and see pictographs or petroglyphs of Native Americans in boats, seem to you to be boats or some kind of a floating raft, I would like to know about it. This is something that's very valuable information that needs to be passed on, that anthropologists and archaeologists want to overlook because of the manifest destiny theory, the theory or the story that they want to tell, that they want people to believe. And part of this goes all the way back to the conquering of the Native American tribes and groups. And because the early American people wanted to justify what they were doing by displacing these people, by conquering these people, by killing all the buffalo, by subjugating them, by putting them on reservations and forcing them to different areas, they came up with manifest destiny and used that as an excuse to control the narrative, which has always been done by the conquering peoples. The conquering peoples write the history, and they want that history to not be negative towards what they did. They don't want to be remembered in history as looting and pillaging and conquerors. They want to be remembered as being brought in here by God and teaching these people, these backward people that had no religion, so to speak of, that they believed, and Christianizing them and turning them into American citizens. Well, we know the true history, and we know that history is always written by those that conquer, and it's not without a lot of black marks and a lot of things that went on that weren't really respectable or right. But this doesn't, I'm not saying that we need to file any reparations or do anything like this. I think that we just need to be aware of our history so that we do not repeat it. Trying to go back and make reparations in behalf of people that are dead, have been dead for hundreds of years, is not the right way to do things. And destroying our history because we don't want to remember our history just makes it so that we repeat the bad parts of history all over again. We forget where we came from and what happened, and we are doomed to repeat it if we ignore the past. Some things that are of notable interest. I believe that human civilization on this continent goes back much further than anthropologists and archaeologists will admit. I know of many incidences of petroglyphs that show animals that should, according to geology, according to paleontologists, were dead millions of years ago. And yet, here they are, found depicted in petroglyphs and pictographs on Native American artwork that archaeologists tell us were hundreds or thousands of years old, not millions of years old. So how do they explain these extinct animals being represented by the Native American people? One of the things that I find very interesting is there's a very well preserved, a beautiful petroglyph panel that shows a four-winged dinosaur. So a four-winged bird dinosaur that had a rounded tail, a crest on its head, and a beak. I've shown pictures of this before, but it is one of the evidences that show that these groups of people along the Grand Canyon region go back much further than what anthropologists and archaeologists will tell us. We have petroglyphs of alligators or crocodiles and sea turtles. These things which we know exist in the fossil record in these regions, we know they exist in the fossil record. We see them in around Lake Uinta, Lake Bonneville, Lake Lahontan. We have shark's teeth all in deposits all over. We have all kinds of fossil beds. Dinosaurs that were drowned or died in deep mud. They were buried with deep mud and fossilized. Some of them were so well preserved that they're even finding some tissue still left within the bone marrow or within the fossil. We have millions and millions of petrified trees all over this area of the United States, the southwestern region, the desert region. This entire area was covered by an inland sea, and then later by inland lakes. As the sea drained and created the start of the Colorado River and these other drainages, the events that happened later, the volcanic activity, the earthquakes, the Colorado Plateau uplift, all of these geological events added to these huge inland lakes that were left by this inland sea. It caused them to drain suddenly with these catastrophic events, and added to the growing rift of the Grand Canyon, of the Green River Gorge, of all these large rivers in the southwestern United States. And eventually, these groups of people, these tribes, were forced from their land by these great droughts that followed after they lived in a lush environment covered by water, and were suddenly forced to move to the shores of the lakes and the rivers and the streams and what springs were coming out of the ground. And as those things continued to dry up, they continued to work their way, either going north or going south towards the ocean, towards the major sources of these bodies of water. And then the groups concentrated in different regions. They battled back and forth for the resources that were available in these regions. Eventually, I believe that the core of many of these more sophisticated groups ended up going south and into South America. You have the Aztec people, the Mayan people, many of those other groups of people that I've talked about in the past, that the Chimu people, which I believe were the ancestors of the Fremonts, the Fremont group, the Fremont Indians that are in northern Utah and all over central Utah. I believe that they became the Chimu people down in South America near Peru. If you look at their types of writing, their artifacts, their headdresses, and the artifacts and things that they left, you can see that they are very, very similar. It's very significant. I believe the Aztec people also migrated from the northern Utah region, and that they ended up in Mexico. I believe that the time period in which they were in the northern Utah region, they lived on a great lake, probably Lake Uinta. They had a complex civilization that lived on the marshes, a place of whiteness, a place of the heron. Their corn species, the grain species, and the squash species that the Aztec used are traceable all the way down to Mexico. They can be found in all these different ruins and things of the people that were left here. The small fragments of the core group that decided to stay have the same types of crops and the same types of religion that the Aztec people have and had. As it slowly evolved, you can see the influences that they had. At Chaco Canyon with the Aztec, interacting with other groups of people. As the Aztec turned towards human sacrifice, you can see evidences of that at Chaco Canyon and among the Anasazi people themselves. And you don't see that talked about a lot by anthropologists and archaeologists, but it is known, the evidence is there, that these people performed human sacrifice, they engaged in cannibalism, and I believe that was one of the things that caused the downfall of these nations. It is what I believed allowed them to become susceptible to the Spanish. And the Spanish were abhorred, they were horrified by what they saw among the Aztec, and that was one of the reasons that they justified what they did to the Aztec and to the Aztecs' treasure, the Aztecs' records, the Aztecs' artwork. They felt justified in destroying it because of what they saw in the human sacrifice and among these people.